Welcome to episode 6 of the Movie Guide Podcast. I'm Jordan. I'm here with my co-host and editor, Greg.
Hello.
Figure I'd give you a shout out there for being editor since you do more work than I do with this.
Oh, you read the script.
The little bit of
That's
an outline.
a lot of chicken scratch on that paper.
Yeah, I can't read most of it, but it'll work. So this week we're doing our final countdown to Halloween episode. This will be our fourth one. We previously did classic horror movies, slasher movies, and zombie movies. And this week we're doing modern horror movies. And I'm classifying modern as after 2000.
Which might be a stretch for me because
the arbitrary date that I came up with.
I have 15 years of life before then, so I may have to have Jordan rein me in.
Well, I have 6 years of life.
Yeah, how many horror movies were we watching at 4 years old?
None, approximately. Unless you consider Jurassic Park a horror movie, which when you're a small child you might. So.
Or Arachnophobia. That's one of the ones I wouldn't put on that list. Because for me, that was terrifying.
Arachnophobia is a modern horror movie?
For me, like you said, when you were 6 watching, or 5, whatever, watching scary movies, Jurassic Park, for me it was Arachnophobia. I saw that movie when I was 5 or 6 and it ruined my life.
Yeah, well, you were 5 or 6 in like 1980, so...
Oh my god. Let's move on.
Anyway, just a heads up, I'm dealing with a minor cold, but hopefully we can press through this and it won't be that much of a problem. But if I sound different and worse than I usually do, that would be why. So we're going to kick off our discussion today just with a basic kind of question that I pose to you and just to us in general to get us talking. And that's why do these movies, most of them, why do they suck? Because a lot of them made recently are really bad. I mean, you've got movies like The Devil Inside and The Devil's Due, and my personal favorite title of all time, because it makes absolutely no sense, The Last Exorcism Part 2.
Yeah, wow.
There's also a sequel to a movie I'm sure we'll get to because you like it a lot. There's The Haunting in Connecticut.
There's a sequel to that?
There's speaking of bad titles, there's The Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghosts of Georgia.
Oh my god. I mean, is it the same character? I didn't even know.
I don't know. I've never seen it.
I think The Haunting in Connecticut is one of the best in recent history, anyway.
It's good. I did top 10 modern horror movies on jordansmovieguide.com. Quick plug. And it didn't make my list. It was honorable mention. But
well, that's fine. I mean...
Yeah. But it is good. I enjoy it.
I can't believe they made a sequel.
Yeah, but so anyway, there's movies out there like that exist for reasons we don't know. They're just so bad. And there's a bunch of reasons that make these movies bad. Why don't you start us off, see if you can give us a few
Well,
reasons.
okay. So the easiest one to pick on is the format. You have, a set of, it's almost always teenage kids or something like that. But so you have, I guess you have kind of two forms. You have the teenage angle where you have a bunch of quirky teenage kids that run into some rigmarole. And then you have the family that moves into a new house.
Yeah.
And while I of those two, I probably would always go with the family moving into a new house story.
Oh yeah, those are usually the only ones that are good.
Right.
You hardly ever find a group of teenagers getting terrorized as a good movie.
The only one that I, at least recently, again, because since we're focusing on recent movies, that I would classify as okay in the teenager category, and I know you don't like this movie, but Cabin in the Woods.
Oh my god, I hate that movie.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I would put that at an 8 or 9. I love that film.
Oh.
That's fine. But at least...
We'll talk about that later.
Perhaps. But anyway, I would put that solidly in the okay category for the teenagers category of movies. And the family category of movies, the trope that is frustrating, or the typical problems with that, let me rephrase. You have usually something bad is happening and they ignore it and then it gets worse. That's always happening in a film. Somebody gets possessed and then behaves radically different, and people will just sort of either ignore it or... I mean, it's the sort of problems like the drama that gets created for the sake of the plot, and it just doesn't feel real. And we talk about this all the time about something being earned, and again, this just isn't... Those moments aren't earned in a movie.
Well, see here, I don't necessarily classify those kind of things, the format, as you called it, necessarily.
Well, but they're the things that happen over and over again.
Well, I don't
necessarily
consider that the reason the bad ones are bad, because it also at times is the reason the good ones are good.
Well, I guess then it's the execution.
Yeah,
I'm getting it.
Well, I think the thing is that the number one reason these movies these movies suck are that most of them are lazy. They're so lazily made, and I think the reason the reason behind that is they're so cheap to make, and you've got this target audience that are going to go see any of these movies you throw out in theaters. So they're always going to make a bunch of money off a micro budget. You can make them for,
so long as if you keep your budget within a certain range, you're guaranteed a certain audience. You can expect X millions.
You can make a movie worth $3 million and $75 million.
What's the big number everybody likes to throw around for the original? I keep wanting to say Poltergeist.
Paranormal Activity.
Paranormal Activity. They spent like $13,000 to make that
movie.
Yeah,
very low.
And then they grossed, I don't know, 20 or 30 million or even more.
That led to really lazy, terrible sequels.
Well, I think that those movies are decently good. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would put those maybe at a 6 or 7.
I really like the first one, but I don't like any of the sequels at all.
So that's the found footage. Another
style
of movies.
I don't like found footage for the most part. I think that it can be executed well, like in the first one. Yeah, I think my problem with the latter movies is less about the found footage. It's partially that because it gets tiresome, because like we've done this before, we've seen this movie 3 times now.
The plot to those movies is not so good. Like the plot that connects all the films.
They tried though. There's a mythology there. They just either don't focus on it enough, or they don't execute it well. I'm not really sure which one it is, because there is, like, the main demon is always Toby the Demon. It's that character per se, and so there is that bit of mythology there, and they try and expand on it at times. And
Toby's the little kid, right? That gets killed or something.
I'm not sure. I don't remember. Those were ones that I didn't actually go back and watch this week, but. But yeah, those movies just... What the first one did well was it built tension without showing you anything. It built tension by showing you really little. And then it would have an occasional jump scare that worked with the movie. Because
the payoffs were nicer because you built up to them. And so when you finally had a big scary thing happen, something moves, somebody gets dragged out of bed or whatever, it's a big deal.
See, because jump scares are one of those things that are the problem with these movies today. And I won't say that all jump scares are bad, because they can be executed really well. I mean, there's times where, the intensity of the movie builds up and you have a jump scare, but that's not why you're scared at the moment. It's because of all this other stuff that's happening, and it keeps expanding upon that, and you have these moments in it where they might be jump scares, but they work. But most of the time, they're just the payoff that you get, and then it's over, and those are the only things scaring you after them. You got these points, and that's the only thing that is scaring you throughout the movies. That's the problem I have with jump scares. The first one uses them well, the rest of them don't. The rest of them just use little cheap ones. Like, I don't know, it's the 3rd or 4th movie where it's the girl who's doing her on the laptop, and
okay, that one I haven't seen.
She like leaves her laptop for a second to go look for something, so you're like, okay, what's
about to happen?
What's about to happen? She jumps back on the bed. That's a jump scare. And it's like, come on, what are we doing here? I mean,
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Like, that's so pointless. Why is that scene even necessary? Because you want the audience to be scared, and this is the only way you know how to do it, because everybody's tired of this series already, so you have no other options. It's kind of where...
So I think you've hit the nail on the head. With jump scares are definitely the problem with modern films. So the question then it becomes, how do you do it correctly? And in my opinion, the easy answer is go back and work on your story. Make sure that the story you're telling is really good.
Plenty of them do it well. I mean, the first Paranormal Activity, like we mentioned, The Conjuring, which we watched the other night, uses jump scares very effectively.
Yeah, I can go on and on about that movie. I liked that a lot.
Did you like it? We didn't talk about it after we watched it. You had never seen it. I'd seen it.
No.
I
think what was so great about that movie is that this is, we'll pivot to this later, why I like Trick or Treat so much. That, I think most scary stories, there's not a lot there. Like you can't go on and on and on before you're just like, okay, how many times are we going to watch this ghost almost get somebody, or how many times is somebody going to almost die, whatever. You kind of have a very short tale. So when you go on for an hour 90 minutes, or an hour, 90 minutes,
Really?
an hour and a half, 90 minutes. It's hard to hit that mark sometimes, and so I think it's useful to tell shorter stories, or in the case of The Conjuring, mix it up. So you have almost two parallel stories. You have the story of the family who's suffering, then you have the story at the very beginning. They tell you about the doll. And then you have the story in the middle about
which we'll talk about. I'll go on about the spin-off on the
yeah,
doll
because
later.
there's more. Unfortunately, I
you've-
feel like that's probably not a good idea.
You've never seen it, but I'll go off on that because I have.
So then they have these investigators,
Mhm.
which apparently have an anchor in history.
Lorraine and something Warren. I don't remember the guy's name.
And they
Ed Warren, I think.
maybe
was
I
his
don't
name.
recall. I was too scared to remember. So they enter the story, and they're the ones who help, mediate between the ghosts and whatever else. And the story about what the ghost is up to, I don't know how. I guess it's fair enough. Maybe we won't spoil it or recent enough. I won't spoil it for you. But the reasons behind the ghost's actions or whatever, I thought they were fairly good.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a little flimsy when you go back to like its initial motivation, but the way that it's perpetrating all the scary things that are happening, that was really good. Having the 5 daughters in the family experience a little different version of the ghost, and some see one ghost and others see a different ghost.
And it does what I said earlier. It has jump scares in it, but it has so much other stuff in the movie that's scary.
It's very rich
Yeah.
in content.
Like one scene in particular, it's not really a spoiler.
A lot of the good ones in the trailer.
When the girl is in bed and she has her leg pulled and she wakes up, and you see her staring behind the door. At
we
nothing.
talked about this.
At nothing. You don't see anything as the
You
audience.
see nothing.
And she calls over to her sister who's in the same room. She's like, "There's nothing there." Like she goes over and she like opens the door and she's like, "There's nothing there." And she turns back around. She's talking to her sister, trying to calm her down. She's like, "No, it's standing right behind you."
Yeah.
And it's you don't see anything, but you see this girl's reaction that it scares the crap out of you.
Yeah, because I think what that scene does so well is it puts you in the place of the sister, who doesn't see anything, and you're like, because it's so much more common in your life to not see anything, so you can totally identify. You can just imagine how terrifying it would be for someone to react that way around you, and then to tell you that whatever they're looking at is right next to you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it's what I have 3 younger brothers. If one of them woke up from what I would think was just a bad dream and was like, "There's something," I mean, I would go over there and prove that there was nothing there too.
Yeah, because you're a big bad brother. You're gonna fix everything.
But then the fact that it wasn't really a dream, and we as the audience know that, but we just can't see, and we're looking the whole time, but we can't see what she's looking at. So it's moments like that while there are jump scares in the movie, there's so much other stuff that's scary that's what makes it good. That's my favorite modern horror movie, I would say. It's the top of the list.
I was terrified to see that. Well, I said terrified. I avoided that movie because it did actually look scary. Whereas other more recent scary movies, I wasn't as hesitant.
The Clap Game.
This I want to talk about that for a minute. I love the idea that this is the family plays this little game where they go, somebody hides.
It's hide and seek, but
they incorporate some clapping, so you kind of, it's sort of Marco Polo meets
regular
hide and seek, and they go around and clap, and then you try to find them. The little ghost in the house, because there's several ghosts in the house. So I'll leave it there, and one of them picks up on the clapping and starts using that to tease the family.
And it starts, I think, it was one of either the first or the second time they played the game was when all the sisters were playing originally, and one sister hears the clapping, and so she goes over here, and then we don't see the ghost at this point doing anything. We kind of think something's going on, but at the same time we're just like, oh, she misheard, and she doesn't actually know where it is. The second time is when the mom is playing with the little sister, and then she is looking for the sister, and she hears clapping, so she goes over to this wardrobe, and and you see, she's like, "All right, I need a clap," and you see these hands come out of the wardrobe. It's not even a jump scare. It just you see them, and then you get the clap,
and then they did a really good job. There's always something to see in the background.
Yeah,
and the cameras plays tricks on you because they're always framing the shot in such a way to so that there's this big other side of the screen to be looking at,
Mhm.
and sometimes there's something there and sometimes there's
Yeah.
not. And in this case, the camera just does what's called a rack focus, where you're focusing on her and then they focus on the stuff in the background, and then oh geez.
And then, so that was the second time. The third time is she gets trapped in the basement.
Yeah.
And she's got matches, so she's trying to get the light because she can't get the door open.
Oh, and they reach
And
out from
then
behind her,
they reach out from behind her and clap again. And yeah.
and she just loses it at that
Yeah.
point.
And then
So-
the husband comes, and it's at the same time as the girl is seeing it in the bedroom. Like, all these things are happening at once, and the husband comes home, and you gotta wonder what he's thinking. Like, what is going on? Like,
Yeah.
she's trapped in the basement screaming. They're upstairs screaming. Like, what is going on?
And another good point about this movie is that everybody reacts in an appropriate way. Okay, fine,
Yeah.
they can't move out because they make a point about the family's got everything sunk into the house, and the dad's a truck driver, and
Yeah.
he's coming and going, and sometimes he's gone for a week, and it's just not an ideal situation for them to just take up and go somewhere else. But everybody reacts appropriately. There's no weird. That's another thing I really like about The Haunting in Connecticut. Reactions of people feel genuine.
Yeah.
But there's another point I was going to make.
Which is another problem with these movies. A lot of the times is that they
people
don't
do something
react.
that's completely nonsensical.
Yeah.
They either it's like, oh, let's split up in this abandoned knife factory. You know,
Yeah.
you don't do that.
One movie I do like, called You're Next. You haven't seen it, but you kind of know the basic premise behind it.
That's the one with the wolf masks or whatever.
Yeah, it's a very self-aware kind of movie. It knows what it is, so it pokes fun at it.
Those movies do it best.
It's a modern slasher movie. It's a little too violent. Like it's pretty gory at times, but I mean if you can get past that, it's a really good movie. And there's this one scene that's they're like, okay, it's this home invasion movie, so they're being attacked by these outsiders. Like, okay, where should we go? And one person's like, let's go down the basement. There's no windows there. And the main girl, like you would do in any other horror movie, is we'll all go down the basement. And the main girl's like, no, that's dumb because they could just pour gasoline down the stairs and light us all on fire or something like that. So it knows what it is and pokes fun at other movies like it.
That's what I like
that.
so much about Scream.
Yeah,
Scream plays on that, and they go to the next level where they actually call out. That's what you would do in a horror movie.
Yeah. So things like that, I don't know how I got onto that, but because saying that people do stupid stuff in these movies, which they didn't in this, and in other good ones, is like all the reasons these people are doing these things are because they have to. Like when the little girl goes and investigates behind the door, she's doing that to protect her little sister and show her that nothing's there. It's something an actual person would do.
Sure.
It's not just forced into the movie.
Well, and then the dad talking about later on. There's a scene where they finally get the investigators there, and the dad is explaining so there's a door that's been kind of roped shut, not to prevent anyone from going through it, but it's been banging around, and it reminded me a little bit of Poltergeist.
Right.
When you see the investigators finally show up and they're so used to the little kid's bedroom having toys fly around in it and stuff like that.
Well, another part that's in that same scene is you find out they're all sleeping in the same room now.
Yes.
Which makes perfect logical sense if
yeah.
something's going on.
It would be a movie that would mess with that. Would everybody go, oh, I guess it's time to go to bed, and we are all going to split up to our room? Like the Paranormal Activity would do that.
Another part about that is it doesn't do it the cheap way like a lot of movies do, where they'll have somebody have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and there'll be a jump scare in there.
I do like that in the movies, like you said, that know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
I just most recently I watched the new Goosebumps movie that's in theaters. It's aimed at children. It's a more hokey movie or whatever. But the Goosebumps books were things I read as a kid, and I'm a huge fan. One of the things they do is they have, in part of traveling through the story, they have to walk through the cemetery, and they set it up as everybody's like, of course they have to walk through the cemetery, and it's a little bit like an adventure story or a video game where you're just gearing up for the next level, and they played it off differently. So when a movie does that right, and that, okay, of course it's a scary story, we have to have the zombie, we have to have the grave, the vampire, the da-da-da-da, and we're checking boxes off, then I like it.
Yeah, well...
And this movie threw that around on you, and sometimes you were expecting to go, sometimes you weren't. The best scene for me in this whole movie that I think works with that is when the spouse of the two investigators, the husband and wife investigators, the woman is outside. She's supposed to be clairvoyant or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She's outside helping with the laundry with this family, pulling the laundry. And there's a storm rolling in, and she's looking up, and you're going like, I'm thinking like, okay, the ghost's gonna control the weather. They've jumped the shark. Like this movie's done for me. But that was a distraction for you to be like, oh crap, there's a storm coming. Everybody has to be stuck inside. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what this is about. And so she's taking down the laundry, and she loses a sheet in the wind, and it wraps around a person as if they're standing there, but there's no ghost. I mean, basically, it silhouettes the ghost for you. Or highlights the ghost for you, and then it blows away through the wind. That right there.
Well, did you miss the part
up in the window
where the sheet blows up towards the window and then falls, and you see the ghost
right behind
in the window now?
Yeah.
And then that's when the mom gets possessed, isn't that scene?
Well, right, but what I'm getting at was that there's misdirection there,
mm-hmm.
and
yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, like what I was saying when. You know, the trope where someone has to go to the bathroom in the night, that's where you usually get a cheap jump scare. There's no other reason for it. They go in, they'll like open the door and there'll be the ghost there or something like that. It's cheap. But if it can be done right. I've seen, I don't know in what movie, it's like someone does get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom.
Oh, we talked about this. Amityville Horror, the newer one. The little boy gets up to go to the bathroom. Is that the one you talked about?
I don't think that is that.
Okay.
But no.
That one's great because I'll tell that story.
But what I'm saying is, where I can't remember what movie it is, but they get up, they go to the bathroom, the camera's following them. You keep waiting for something to happen. He finishes, he leaves, he goes back to bed. Nothing ever happens. That is perfectly executed because it keeps you.
Oh, that might have been Paranormal Activity.
It keeps you intrigued and it keeps you into the movie.
Yeah, because you're
but
waiting.
Nothing ever happens, and it's perfect. You don't get this cheap jump scare that's only in the movie for that, and there's no other reason.
Yeah.
You feel scared because it's a scary movie. But there's nothing
right.
Actually,
so I think that's important when you can terrify the audience by doing almost nothing. Then you've like max level. You've achieved your goal.
Which this movie does a lot. The Insidious series does that a lot. The first Paranormal Activity does that a lot. I mean, all these ones that are actually good, that's how they accomplish it.
I don't know if this is on your list. We can talk about it later if it's not. Music.
No, we can talk about it now. It's not on my list, but we can talk about it now.
Okay. So
the script is very it changes, it ebbs and flows as we talk. It's
yeah. Well, if it was on your list later, that's why I was thinking about it. But so for me, music in movies, sometimes I hate it, sometimes I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So in a movie like The Avengers, I get so tired of big anthems over and over and over again.
So yeah, I like stuff like that.
It
gets me. I'm like, yeah,
it has its place. You know, like if the first time the Avengers quote literally assemble.
Yeah.
Oh my God! You know, I'm pumped. But then it happens 7 times, and you're like, okay,
that's a fair point.
Let's move on. Then there's other moments where the music I think is really, really appropriate. A movie like The Messengers, not the best scary movie there is.
Seen it.
You haven't?
Mm.
I think it's worth a watch. It's decent production value. And Kristen Stewart.
Oh God.
She doesn't seem like a terrible actress yet. I thought her performance, her sort of moody, not almost always the same face, portrayal of her characters works well in this movie, I think, because it is a scary movie. But the music that they use, the theme for this it's not scary, it's just downright eerie and raises the hair on the back of your neck. And the intro, I can't remember if it's over the end credits or the beginning credits, where they have just shots of like the inside of cupboards and like a single stripe of light coming through something and highlighting like a dusty floor with an old toy on it. It's just we'll have to listen to the intro after if you like. It is great. It's really, really good, and it sells that, and it's the same thing that happens with The Exorcist. That theme happens once in the movie, and we will forever associate that theme with that movie. It's really, really well done.
Right. Which, leading into the music being bad, or going back to what we just talked about in the jump scares, is most of the time, if you're paying enough attention to the movie, you always know a jump scare is coming.
Yeah, because the music builds.
Music builds, and it builds, and it builds, then it gets quiet. and you
And there's a pause, and then boom.
yeah. So you see, so it's not scary because you know it's coming. So like
We've been trained by these. It's happened. That's what happens. It's happened too often.
yeah, and
It's not a bad technique. It's a fantastic technique because it works.
it
so well.
was a fantastic technique. Then
Yes,
it's overused.
overused.
So I think I've mentioned it even on the podcast before. I know I've told you before is that when you're watching a scary movie, don't want to be scared anymore. Cover your ears, not your eyes, because it's the music and it's the sound effects that get you to jump, and not what you see on screen most of the time.
So, which means that you can easily mess with the viewer
Right.
and make the movie just. I mean, I think you could add, on a scale of 1 to 10, you can add a point to your movie simply by using your music really well.
Well, I mean,
Or removing it entirely
if
from
that's
certain
that was my
scenes.
next point is if it can be used really effectively. Actually, using the music can be used equally as effective if you use nothing at all. Have a dead silent scene.
I haven't seen it recently enough to be sure about this. If I were to make a top list, one of the movies at the very top for me would be The Mothman Prophecies. That uses music.
I don't consider that
sparingly.
horror, but I know what you're talking about.
Well, but it's certainly not. What other genre would you put it in? It's got a demon in it.
I'd kind of
it's got
suspense mystery. It might be a horror.
I'm not saying it's.
We don't need to argue. That's semantics.
classic
That's
horror.
semantics.
Yeah, classic horror is your Halloween or your whatever, but it's certainly in that category much more than I don't know ponies and rainbows.
Well, yeah.
So at any rate, there's one of my favorite moments in that movie is when he's on the phone with whatever it is he thinks he's been seeing, and it just he says, "What's in my hand?" and you hear chapstick, and he just like, whoa, no music in that scene at all.
Yeah.
It's great.
So it can be used effectively either way. Can also be used poorly either way. I think it's all about the directing. Like, I'm not one that's going to comment on things like the directing or, the visual, like the camera shots and stuff like that, unless they really impress me or it's really shockingly bad.
Yeah, so it's a cold or hot. You're not really in the middle.
Yeah, so something that I've picked up on it a couple times that was like, wow, there's a really good use of a really long shot, like that's really good directing. Happened in The Conjuring a couple times.
Oh, yeah. The panning shots.
Yeah.
Where they moved around
Mm-hmm.
and you could see, you got the lay of the land in that whole house.
It happens once at the beginning. Before anything scary even happens, you're like, okay, this is a well-directed movie. Is when they're first moving into the house, the little girl picks something up to move in, and the camera literally follows her from the door all the way through the living room, into the kitchen, then back up the stairs, then downstairs, and outside, and the camera follows her the whole time.
Yeah, it's really fun.
And I'm like, okay, this is a well-directed movie right here. And then it keeps doing shots like that throughout the movie, even when things get scary. Like you were mentioning earlier, how it would focus on different things and always leave this open section, like the main character be on the left side of the screen, but then there's this big open part where you're always looking for something to happen.
You wonder what's going to come up.
Another movie that we watched that really impressed me with stuff like this was It Follows. We watched this a couple days ago. It was
we could talk
really
about that
good.
movie.
Yeah, I saved a spot at the end, but we'll actually talk about good movies after we crap on them a little bit. But yeah, the camera shots in that one were
that's
very well directed.
I think that movie lived or died on that because the whole point of that film is that there's your head's constantly on a swivel because this thing could be anywhere and it's coming for you. And it's hard to tell apart because it's not racing at you, it's walking. It's just a walking pace. And it could look like anything, and et cetera, et cetera. And so the camera's position is so important in that film. And and that way they set it up so that anytime the camera is, looking, like it feels like, wow, I can see way too much behind the person. Now you're looking for any person walking nearby. Is that it? Is that it? It's great.
So, I mean, stuff like that just is really good. That adds to the tension, I think. I think when you have those long shots or you have things that are making you focus to the background, focus on things in the background, that is scarier to me than things like jump scares because it brings you more into the movie, makes it a more immersive experience, and it puts you in the character's shoes because it makes you more paranoid. You're like, what's happening? What's going to happen? What's behind me? That kind of thing. So I think that separates the good ones from the bad ones for sure.
You just brought to mind another thing that I really dislike about scary movies is that it's when they pull in close on a character to make the audience feel like, oh, I can't see what's nearby, and then something comes out of the left side of the screen or whatever and scares the person on screen. if you were in that position, you would easily see what was there.
Yeah.
You know, they
'Cause
do that.
In real life, you have this thing called peripheral vision.
Yeah.
You can see around you.
So they do it. It's a sin, I think, in the context of a movie. It's when the person walks up next to a tree, and then right behind it is the whatever. I mean, you're listening. All these ambient senses, and I feel like they, in those kinds of movies, they prey on the audience's lack of.
Yeah, it's another thing
context.
like we were talking about with the music. You can kind of always tell when something's coming. They zoom up on the character like that, and you're like, all right, she hasn't turned around in like 2.5 minutes. Like something's behind her now, and we just can't see it.
Now if there's actually, it reminds me of a scene in Messengers that's really well done like that, because they hear it, but they're zoomed in on her face, and all you can kind of see behind her is this vague shadow moving towards her. But it's she knows it's there, which makes a difference.
Okay.
This is what I'm getting at.
Because that seems a little cheap to me, just on the surface.
Well, you can watch it and you can determine if you as the character, or excuse me, you as the audience, don't know, but the character does. Like for example, let's say that someone walks in and they see a dead body, and all you watch is their reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of Alfred Hitchcock style. That's artistic. That's a directing choice that I think is really good. But if they walk in and they don't see the damn thing in front of them until you, the audience, see it, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it can either be used well or poorly. I think that's the dividing line we're making here. Is
and
I think it depends. This is a genre that depends a lot on the directing, a lot on the cinematography, a lot on the writing, even sometimes as to when things are happening, more so than anything else.
Yeah, let's take a romantic comedy for example. You're not going to have a lot of creative shots. You can have a couple band shots or whatever, but it's mostly going to be these wide shots of characters, and not you're not going to have some stuff like when they walk into the Conjuring, when they look into every time that they come up to the basement, the camera's always looking up.
Yeah,
and you got this weird angle, and it makes you uncomfortable as a viewer, and that's the kind of thing you would do there. You would never do that in a romantic comedy or.
Speaking of things that make you uncomfortable in that movie and scare you without really being anything, is a couple times they show these pictures, and it's the pictures that they've taken throughout the house, like when somebody's sleepwalking or something like that, and there's this little black figure behind the characters, and you can see it vaguely in the pictures, like when they take
what
when they take
Conjuring,
like when they take the pictures to the priest as proof of the
well, there was I don't remember that.
You don't remember that? All right, so
I remember later that they is it in the film that the lady said she could see a shadow behind them? I remember
it's
that.
in those pictures. They're showing them.
Gosh, I don't.
They're showing them to they've got these still frames, and they're going to the priest so he can ask the Vatican or whatever to perform an exorcism on this house, and they've got these pictures. In each picture, there's like a little girl, and there's a black shadow with like a hand on her shoulder. Or there's the group. You mentioned it because the when they first meet the paranormal investigators, the group is all group of kids is all standing together, and you were like, wow, she really looked at that one girl really weird. Well, later on you find out because in this picture there's a shadow behind her.
I didn't realize that. I thought the lady was just seeing it and describing what she saw. I don't remember it actually being in the photograph. She did
at one point, but it was also in the photograph.
Yeah.
Okay, so but my point is that was a scary part because it's like, wow.
The whole time, the whole time it was there and we didn't know.
It's there and you can't see it. It's an effective use, which I don't even have this written down, but big problem in horror movies today is showing you what's scaring you. Because most of the time it ends up being this CGI mess that it's not scary anymore. One example, a perfect example, is the movie Mama. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh, yeah. I never saw it, but I saw the trailer, and I know what you're talking about.
It was actually, surprised me how good it was for a lot of the movie. And then it shows you what this Mama character actually is, this ghost or demon or whatever it is. And it's so CGI, and it's laughable how bad it is. Like, I started laughing at the movie. This isn't scary anymore because I've seen it, and the first Insidious movie is like it to a lesser extent. I just think that the way the demon ends up looking is a little goofy. I think that it wasn't meant. It was meant to be more scary than it actually was to me.
Mhm.
It happens in anything. Once you see what's scaring you, it's less scary.
I think there's a lot to be said for just your own imagination. It's why it's why the people always say, "Oh, the book was so much better than the movie." It's because the movie tells you what you're looking at, whereas the book lets you imagine what you're looking at. And so I think of a house, and it's always the perfect house because it's the one I imagine.
Yeah.
Whereas they show me on screen like, "Oh, I thought it was going to be on the other side," or blah,
Yeah.
blah blah blah. So I think that's the problem. That
Your
comes there.
imagination is can be a lot scarier a place than.
So if you can show like let's say that there's some creepy demon or whatever, just show maybe its hand pulling out of from behind a tree or something like
Well, I mean, The Conjuring does it well. I mean, the demons that they show or the ghosts that they show that are really scary looking, and they don't look fake, and they use them very sparingly.
right.
Like
Well,
what the scariest part is when they're doing the exorcism, and the sheet rips that they've thrown over top of her, and you see the demon instead of the woman's face, but it's just through this little sliver.
Yeah, that was pretty.
That was really scary. I think you made a comment on it at the time. You're like, "Whoa, no."
Well, I was thinking of the M. Night Shyamalan Signs when they're in the cornfield and you just see the foot of this alien kind of disappear. I think that's it's where we talk about Jurassic Park being so good is they use the CGI very sparingly, and there's show it, and just I think you can get a long distance out of your CGI by just showing a little bit and letting the audience fill in the rest.
Yeah, it's definitely. I much prefer movies where it's using your imagination more than anything. Like, what am I not seeing rather than what am I seeing? Because that is scarier, in my opinion, at least. Another problem that these movies have is there seems to be a lack of distinction between gory and scary. Because a lot of these movies go the super gore torture porn kind of route, where you're like, okay, I can't even watch this. It's not even scary. You just can't watch it because it's so disturbing.
Yeah, the biggest committer of sin is the Saw series.
Saw movies, yeah. I don't like any of them. I think the first one is okay. Wouldn't say it's good.
I think the first one would have been a lot better if it was 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
I mean, they had to get really
but then
creative with that because there's just not a lot going on.
The rest of those movies are brutal. They're not even brutally bad. I mean, they are brutally bad, but they're brutal.
Yeah.
They're...
What do you think it is about that level of violence that's so appealing to audiences?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Do you know how much they grossed by chance?
I don't. I don't know that it is appealing to audiences.
I mean, people went. I mean, people went to see the movie. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because especially as the movies go on,
because I think
they just
I think
the attacks get more gruesome. The violence is.
I think we're trained to think things like that are scary, but in reality, we're just looking away because it's so awful. It's not actually scary. It's
a different kind of scary.
We envision it happening to us, and we're like, "Oh my god!"
It goes from being spooky and creepy to being frightening.
Mm-hmm.
I think, or just horrific.
Horrific's a good word.
Straight up horrific, rather than, I mean, I think we use the word horror in the film genre a little differently when we use it in actual language, and so horrific, all this blood and gore, etc. I think it speaks to a different audience. Anyway, people, I think there's a part of it that people are like, they want to see how much more extreme they could possibly get, so the audience is already interested. I think there's a certain subset of people who are going to go see the next one anyway because they liked the first one. Like the Fast and Furious movies. They're not doing a whole lot different in each movie, but you're going to go see it because you liked the first one or the second one.
I just think of scenes from those Saw movies that makes me cringe, and I guess that's what they are going for. That's what they want to make audiences do.
Do you think that there's sort of a working out your own violence by watching it on the screen?
That's always a possibility. I mean,
I want to fly so I can watch a Superman movie. That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, it's hard. I know. I don't.
I'm just wondering if this is a comment on our society.
It could be.
That we like.
But I mean, I don't remember which of those sequels it's in. But when someone falls into the bed of needles or whatever, and it's like, oh no, like that's not even that gory. It's just why
it's gross and that's freaks you out. I'm forced to think about the Roman Colosseums, these were spectator events, and then surely those were just as gory or even less so probably than the Saw films. But I think it speaks to that same part of us.
I'm not sure. I mean, I would like to think that it doesn't, but I think that you're probably right at the same time. But I know that I saw one or two of those movies, and I won't ever watch them.
So are we in agreement then that, at least for us, if your movie is relying on gore, then you've basically lost your kind of scary movie credibility?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not saying that your movie necessarily needs to be void of gore. Like You're Next, I love that movie. It's very
but it shouldn't
movie.
It shouldn't be
the reason. It shouldn't be your crux. It shouldn't be
right.
This is what your movie is based on, and that's it. Because the first Saw movie has a story, has a little bit of a twist. The other ones, the only reason the movie exists is to show you these horrific things. That's it. Doesn't have any other story. Doesn't have any other reason. That's why you're there at the movie.
Well, and in most, I'm thinking here now just about most scary movies. What if you're not afraid of being got? It got you.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get me. If you're not afraid of that, then what is there to terrify you?
Right.
Right. It's this idea that your personal bubble, your body, your mind is going to be attacked.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some way there is a level of violence in all of these movies. It's just it's more. Is it physical or is it like possession? Is it you can just be disappeared? It's less violent.
Yeah, it's less abrasive at times. It's just
it's a subtle dividing line, but I think when you see it, you know it.
Yeah. Anyway, my point is that I think is a problem with some of these movies is they just take it too far to that extreme, way past that line and all the way somewhere else.
Well, and yet, we're in this period of one-upsmanship. Every one of these that comes out has to outdo the other, and you get to a point where there's just nowhere else to go.
That leads to my next point. It's kind of a good segue in that everything nowadays, especially in this genre, is a sequel or a remake. A sequel or a remake. And let me say, sequels I don't necessarily hate.
Oh, no, they can be done very well.
You always hear about this idea of like an unoriginality in Hollywood. I don't think that that's necessarily true with sequels because there's so many places you can take it based on where the first movie was and the mythology that it created. You can take it a million different ways. And I think that you can be creative with a sequel. And that there's just lots to explore. So I don't hate those. I don't love a lot of them because many of them are not executed well. Like we were talking about earlier, the Paranormal Activity sequels.
They go up and down. I'm in favor. I think it's the third one where you have the the house where the camera that's panned back and forth and stuff falls on the kitchen ceiling. You guys can look it up.
Yeah, I think it's the third one.
I thought that one was fairly good. Did not like the second one. Did not like the fourth one. The fourth one. Wait, hold on. The fourth one was the girl at the vlogging.
The vlogging?
Making videos.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, then I didn't see the fourth one. I apologize. But that one did not look very good from the trailer.
I think it's the third one that you're mentioning. That's the one where they go back. It's more of a prequel.
Right.
It's like back in the 80s.
But that's not to say that the fourth one had a couple things that I liked when they did the. Oh no, I did see it. Because okay. So the infrared camera where they can see the lines coming off the
I think that's the
remote, and you can see something coming up behind. That was pretty dang good. But they go up and down, and I think that the danger with a sequel is forgetting where you came from and not trying as hard.
Yeah.
And just writing on your own name.
I was disappointed when it came out because I never actually saw it because I heard some really terrible reviews. But Sinister 2, I know you didn't like the first one very much, but I did personally. I think that there
was a handful of good moments, they relied on the kids being evil thing, which I don't like either.
They set up a good mythology behind it, I think, that you could have taken this really good directions, and apparently it did not do that in the sequel. It was just all jump scares kind of thing, and they just got lazy with it, which, that sucks. Which is the problem with these sequels is they have a tendency to get lazy with them, but they could take them in such good directions that's what makes me angry.
Do you think I think it's just like, well, we're going to make money no matter what, so why try hard?
Yeah, I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
And another one I mentioned I was going to talk about a little bit earlier, is the spinoff from The Conjuring is Annabelle.
Yeah, let's tell me about that.
About the doll. I think it's the third one. 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 I think it's
So what's the history behind the doll?
It's a prequel to The Conjuring.
Do they go back to that
/ a
apartment
spinoff.
that we saw at the beginning of the movie?
It's different than that. It's based on this family. This husband buys this wife this creepy doll. I don't know why you would ever give this as a present. She's like been looking for all these old dolls, so he buys her this.
Because the thing's basically a female Chucky. It's terrifying.
And yeah, it was terrifying. And so there's this. The spoiler alert. None of you care because this movie sucks. But so this family, they're sleeping one night. They hear sounds from the house across the street. There's this fight going on, and they hear like gunshots. Somebody dies over there. Dad or husband goes to investigate. I don't think they have any kids. Husband goes to investigate. He gets killed. I think it's the woman from across the street. She's this really creepy looking girl. Comes back. The wife kills her. I don't even remember how it happens, but she's holding the doll. She dies. Blood drips into the doll's eye, and then all of a sudden, this evil spirit, because this woman was such a bad person, lives inside this doll. So the doll becomes supernatural by this demon, and after that, it's just so many just cheap jump scares, and it was terrifying to watch. I'll be completely honest. I went with the girl I was dating at the time, and we were terrified after seeing this movie. But then you think about it and you're like, this movie isn't that scary. I mean, they're all jump scares, so it's really scary at the time, but then 2 days later, you don't remember anything that happened. There's one really good scene that I will say scared the crap out of me, still does to this day. The best part of the movie, it probably boosted a whole point, like out of a 5 or 10 point scale, boosted a whole point, is the main girl is getting chased by this demon or whatever, or she's going... I forget how it's set up, but anyway, she's in the basement of this apartment building they're living in.
Okay.
She's in the elevator. Something's chased her into the elevator. I don't remember what. I think the Annabelle doll just like chased her into the elevator or whatever. She gets in the elevator, closes the door, pushes up. The door opens again. Nothing's there. The door closes again. She's pressing the button trying to get it to get up. The door opens again. Does it like 3 times. You don't see anything. Eventually, she just takes off running up the stairs instead. You don't really see anything that's chasing her. You know, it does some cheap things like all of a sudden there's a thunderstorm going on or something like that, you know, but you don't realize that that's cheap until afterwards. And then she finally gets up to the top of the stairs, door won't open, she turns around, and then this demon that is possessing the Annabelle doll just pops up. It's a jump scare, but it works well in this part of the movie. That was a really scary scene because it's like this elevator door just keeps opening and closing, and you don't see anything.
You know, that reminds me very strongly. There's a real video, or supposedly real video, of a girl who I want to say she was found dead. Again, you could Google this or Snopes it or whatever. But she's standing in it's security cam footage of an elevator in Japan or something like that, because I think the girl was Asian. She's standing in the thing. She hits the button. Elevator doesn't do anything. She hits it again, and the door opens. And she's like, what the heck? So she sticks her head out. Nothing happens. Anyway, eventually, I want to say she gets drug out of the... Whatever pulls her out of the elevator you can't see, and it's super creepy. You'll have to look that up afterwards. But that sounds... I wonder if that's the kind of thing, because that sounds so similar.
It was... I mean, that was the one good part of the movie, but the rest of it... This is what I'm saying with these sequels, is... The concept of that doll in The Conjuring is so creepy.
But it kind of should have been left alone. Right? Is that what you're saying? Like, or do you think that
I think they could have done it well. They didn't, like, at all.
You know,
it's kind of like the ideas of the Star Wars prequels. Like, could have been great, not done well at all, and now we're stuck with them. But so yeah, that's an example of basically a sequel that is not executed well, and they're making, and I'm scared and excited at the same time. Because they're making an actual sequel to The Conjuring that's based on more of these real-life investigators.
Is it the same 2 investigators?
Yeah, the Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Okay, well, see, that's where I was going to lead off.
But this is...
At the end of the movie when they say, we got a case in New Jersey, and that's supposed to be the Amityville Horror family. Boy, I was intrigued by that.
So these group of investigators worked in real life for decades. So there's so many places you can do, so many stories you can do, which is what I said earlier, like... sequels don't necessarily have to be unoriginal because you have so many places you can take it. So I'm excited because it's like, what are they going to investigate next? But I don't want them to get lazy with it and ruin how good the first one was. I'm so scared they're going to do that. That they're just not going to care anymore. But I think the one thing that makes me excited for it is that the director of The Conjuring turned down Fast and Furious 8 to direct The Conjuring 2.
Well.
Because he directed the first Conjuring and did Fast and
Furious
Furious 7.
That's pretty important. When a lot of these, I think this is a critical point. A lot of sequels
aren't directed.
They jump to a different director, and in doing so, you have a whole new vision. And so the pace of the first movie, the tone of the first movie, all the elements that make it good, you've got this new director's vision. And perhaps the first one would have been different if that same director had directed, and therefore the sequel would be better. I think that that's so important, and this is not a horror movie, but it's a really good example of a sequel. Madagascar 1 and Madagascar 2, I think, are hilarious films, and the tone of each movie matches the previous or the sequel. Like, they match very well. And the jokes are the same, the characters they got all the same voice actors. That's another one. If you can't get the same actor, and they were a critical part of that story, and you're going to reinvent or whatever, just be very careful. Because you can totally lose it.
Just stop at that point.
Exactly.
Just stop.
Let the movie stand on its own.
Just let it go. I get that you want to make a sequel, but if you can't get... If the director...
Or reboot it entirely.
If the director is critical and you can't get him back, or if you can't get the actors back, just leave it alone. We don't need to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Take this
high standards.
Take this idea that you have for the sequel, change it a little bit,
and make a
whole new movie.
Bingo. You don't, and that's the other thing. I think we're franchise addicted.
Yeah.
These days, if you're not going to have 3 films, then we don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's the problem. What is wrong? Look at the original Poltergeist. Fantastic movie. Very few problems with that movie. And it stayed alone. It didn't need a sequel. Or did it have... Am I talking...
They have
a sequel?
2 sequels.
Son of a bitch. I didn't know that.
And a remake, which I'll get to in a minute.
Well, the remake all on its own. I totally ruined my plot there. But assume then that Poltergeist only had the single movie. That movie stood on its own very well.
See, I think a good example, not a horror movie, but we've done this a couple times, so I'll do it. Live Free or Die Hard. I think is okay. It's not a Die Hard movie though. If you make that movie,
that's the one with Justin Long.
Yeah, if you take that movie and take the Die Hard name away from it,
it's
a really good action movie.
Yeah, I liked it.
But you put it in the framework of the other Die Hard movies, and it just doesn't have that same feel to it. So it's like you were saying, we're just franchise addicted, and we have to make all these things sequels to these other things. Where if you have this idea that you think might work for a sequel, and you don't think you can do it as a sequel well, just change a couple of things and make a new movie.
The other thing that's happening now, which I think is even worse than the sequel. I would much prefer a sequel than the thing they're doing now, and it's where they split a movie.
Oh,
like Twilight,
Hunger Games,
Harry Potter. Harry Potter started it. I never saw that before that, and I worked in a movie theater for 4 years. I would have seen that. Okay, they may have done it a decade ago. I don't know, but I've never seen that before. Harry Potter did it, and it was incredibly successful, and they made a bunch of money.
And now
granted, it was a 700 or something page book. There's a lot of material there to make 2 films. You move into the Twilight series where it happened again, and there just wasn't enough material there. They stretched it out. Hunger Games, they did it, and now they're going to do it for the other series,
Maze Runner, and Divergent.
Yep. And then the Maze Runner, and you're just looking at how many times you do this.
Especially since Harry Potter was a long book. These other ones aren't long books.
No,
they're 300-page books. You can't. There's only but so much you can do with it. Right. You can't split that into 2 2-hour movies.
So what you end up doing is just dragging it.
Yeah.
We're focusing on parts of the book that a movie would normally never focus on.
I'm not into any of these other series, but I was into Harry Potter, at least at the time. That's a 700-page book, and part 1 feels stretched out.
Yes.
So
it's very difficult to do. Because you have to understand that a film is a very different medium than a book. You can't sit in a book. You can go 20, 30 pages on what a character's thinking the moment before he makes a decision because it's a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
In a movie, you're going to get bored. It's a totally different experience.
It is.
and you have to take that into account. And obviously, you know, we can go on and on. There are some books that are actually much better than the films. The films are a terrible adaptation. I've heard the Percy Jackson series was really ruined by the movies.
See, I don't care about that mostly because I don't read books that often.
Well, but the point I'm making is that you can do it well, and you have to understand that there's. So anyway, when it comes to the sequel line of commentary, you need to be aware of what your movie is, and if you're not going to go all the way, you're not going to give 100%, then it's just not worth making the movie. At least from the viewer's perspective. If it's a business,
yeah.
I mean, really, if you put $10,000 into making a movie and you make $20,000, well, you made a profit, you win. For the audience, it's terrible, and what I think, you know, for the rest of us, it makes us jaded, and we wait around for the next big blockbuster movie that they spent $300 million on or whatever. I think that one of the things I think that should happen in Hollywood is that we should pivot back to these ideas of, you know, what's wrong with having a $10 or $20 million movie that goes out and makes $50 or $60 million?
Yeah.
We don't need to have these $300 million that go out and make $2.5 billion or whatever. I guess that's probably really inflated, probably $1 billion. You know, that's what they've gone for. And so what you end up with is brilliant studios making movies 3 or 4 times a year instead of 10 times a year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously going to be one of those people that goes and sees these huge $300 million blockbusters.
We're all going to see, because they are, you know, they're not
But
terrible.
I do wish that they would go back, because now it's either you make a money for nothing, so it's very low risk, or you make one of these huge movies, and there's not really that in between those movies made
Which
for
it
$20 or
used to
$25
be.
million.
I think that's a lot of the movies that were really great in the 70s, 80s, 90s were doing this pattern.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s, maybe it was Star Wars that kicked it off, it's got to be these massive, huge, big budget movies or we don't go. You know, like take Pixar, for example. They're an example where I think the time and money spent is useful. They have these huge, big, and they, you know, how often does a Pixar movie come out? Every 2 years, 3 years? You know, they spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, they do spend a lot of time on them.
And the reverse would be that you'd get, you know, like DreamWorks, for example, is kicking out movies left and right. Some of them hits and some of them aren't. Almost every Pixar movie's been a hit. So I mean, it's a difficult thing to do, but I think we would benefit from having more of these cheaper budget films and more original stuff. Look at some of the, like Ex Machina, for example. I don't know how much money that movie cost or to make, or how much.
Not much. I think it was pretty.
Was it an indie film that got picked up?
I think it was.
Imagine if you gave a bigger budget to some of these indie directors who come out. You know, like I don't know. Have you seen District 9?
Yeah, I didn't like it very much.
Okay, well,
I know a lot of people love that movie. I'm not.
That's an example of a film that didn't have a lot of interest, and then all of a sudden did, because, as far as I understand, again, this is a totally Google worthy. Peter Jackson passed on Halo, and the slot where that would have ended up in theaters, he gave to another director, a friend of his, and then that got up, and that movie would have never come to fruition.
Right.
If that hadn't been, and it was a decent film, and Chappie, which came out later by the same studio, not as good, but it still had a lot of really great. I mean, you want to talk about heart or something like that. It was a really fun movie to watch, and those don't happen if people don't get given a chance.
Exactly.
And I think there's maybe a cult of personality in the higher rankings of Hollywood that prevents stuff like that from happening.
think even they don't have to be completely original ideas when you're making these movies that you can make for $15-20 million. If you want to make a smaller movie, there's a lot of books that even I've read that can,
why isn't this a movie yet?
That can be made into movies fairly easily.
Yeah. And heck, every who's the one that did Hunt for Red October and John Clancy?
Tom
every John Clancy book, Tom Clancy book is practically a script already.
Yeah.
They read like screenplays.
But that's like the only one. Those Jack Ryan movies are the only ones that are actually made into.
Like
movies.
You could easily go find other authors who are writing like that and pump out their books. And that doesn't mean they're all going to be hits.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be.
But you can, especially these smaller like action thriller kind of movies.
Yeah.
A lot of them take place in a couple of areas. They're really easy to fill. You can make these for $15-20 million.
And then if you're cutting back on the big budget movies, a smaller movie like that can have good effects finally. You know, CG is getting easier to do, and it looks better all the time if you use it sparingly, etc., etc., etc. We could go on and on. But there's room for that. And they're not there.
Yeah, we're way off topic.
Well, but it's a sequel topic.
Yeah,
I think
that's true. But let's get back to what is a problem with horror movies. We talked about some of the sequels are bad, but these remakes are atrocious. These remakes are killing me.
So
Because speaking of unoriginality,
yeah, and they're obvious. I mean, okay, this is the old folks' argument. I think they pale in comparison to the older one.
Oh, yeah.
Poltergeist being the most recent. Example.
my God, it was terrible. You didn't see it.
I did not. I probably never will.
Brutal.
The trailer itself. I mean,
Brutal.
they took some of these really well shot, suspenseful moments and turned them into jump scares.
And they ruined them. They
Yeah.
ruined the original movie. Not ruined the
Well,
original
the original
movie.
movie's still good, but they took the idea and they
Yeah.
just bastardized it.
Oh, it's borderline unwatchable. Is how bad it is. I mean, occasionally it's done all right. The Carrie remake was okay. It wasn't great, but it was
So what was
watchable.
the one we just watched last week? The zombie one that we watched. What was that?
Dawn of the Dead.
That was a decent remake.
Yeah. But that's one of those things that could be updated because the original was so old-fashioned kind of zombie movie that you could put a fresh take on it.
Sure.
Poltergeist didn't need to be remade.
Or I mean, I think Poltergeist would benefit from a freshening up. I don't think that was the right way to do it.
And then you got all these other ones. You know, we've talked about them a little bit when we did slasher movies, but yeah, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's been remade like 4 different times, and they're all bad. Friday the 13th remake is terrible.
Is that
Nightmare on Elm Street is terrible.
Is that a symptom of the way contracts are written? So this is why we've seen so many Spider-Man movies. Is when a studio owns a film or has certain rights to a film, they may not be able to keep it forever. So the part of their contract is if they're not using that title, somebody else, whoever had it originally, gets it back, and so that you'll see them remake this movie every 5 years.
I know that is the reason for something like Spider-Man or something like that. I'll be honest, I don't know if that's the reason for these horror movies.
Because part of me says, well, maybe they're not big enough titles to deserve such a clause like that. Nobody would take them if that's the restrictions they had.
But it just seems like every year there's one of these horror remakes coming out. Luckily, they haven't. I know it's gonna happen. They're gonna do The Exorcist at some point. Watch. Mark my words, they will do The Exorcist at some point.
Why do you bring that up now? Because the anniversary a couple of years ago, or what?
I just think that they've remade everything else. Why would they touch that yet?
I wonder, that would be interesting to investigate because that is prime for remaking. I mean, you watch. I mean, some of the effects are dated pretty. I mean, the head twist, for example, is pretty.
I think it still looks pretty good to me.
Well, I'm not saying that it isn't good for its time or what have you, but certainly you could do a much better job with CG today or animatronics or what have you. So I'm surprised. I guess what I'm saying is I'm surprised it hasn't been remade.
I'm surprised it hasn't either, which is why I'm saying.
So what's your prediction? You want to give a time limit, or just saying
within the next 10 years?
Well, that's a big. A lot of movies are going to be remade in the next 10 years.
I'm just saying, but
I would narrow it down. I'd say the next 3 or 4.
Really?
Sure.
Are you saying they'll start it or it'll come out in the next 3 or 4 years? Because I mean, if it was going to come out in the next 3 or 4 years, then they'd be starting it like in a year.
What I think is probably holding it back is some sort of copyright hold.
I just don't want.
Was that a book first?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. There's a lot of. Go ahead. I keep interrupting.
I just don't want them to touch it. I can't. It's my favorite horror movie of all time, and I don't think that they can do anything but worse by remaking it. And I know that it'll happen because everything else is being remade. Somebody'll do it, and some studio will give them a chance, and it's gonna happen. And I just dread that day.
It occurs to me another one of the problems with some of these movies is maybe they like the idea, the studio likes the idea, they give a guy the budget, he starts going and making it, and then 3/4 of the way through, they're showing off, their dailies, and they're like, this is awful. But now they've sunk, 10, 20, 30, whatever million into it, and they gotta go to the end.
Yeah,
sunk costs.
It makes me sad to just think about that could even be a consideration at some point. I know a lot of some people have said, I think it was either the writer or the director of the original was like, no, nobody's ever going to touch this. But famous last words, right? Somebody always says that this will never be remade while I'm alive, and then here we are.
I just read recently, people have been approaching Bill Watterson to do a Calvin and Hobbes movie or to do a TV show or just do merchandise, and he's resisted and resisted and resisted. And, it's been 20 years since that cartoon ended, and he hasn't done it. I have faith, I guess is what I'm saying, that maybe we'll hold out and we won't have to see a remake.
I hope so.
On the flip side, though, what if it's a good remake?
But what if it's not?
But what if it's not?
I mean, I think...
What if it's Star Wars all over again?
Yeah. But okay, I think we've crapped on these movies enough. Let's talk about some of the ones that we really like. I mean, we talked about The Conjuring a lot.
Haunting in Connecticut,
But
I think.
don't you tell
always
the
gonna be on
three
top.
folks at home that are listening that actually...
The Haunting in Connecticut is a good movie because it has a worthwhile plot, and it breaks the pattern of having a very obvious villain in the house that you push against the whole time. And in this case, I'm going to spoil alert because I think it's really important to talk about this key element here to illustrate why the film is so good. It turns out that the force that we've been grappling with through the majority of the first half of the movie turns out to be a positive force. And this movie sets it up in such a way that you kind of assume that once you're in the afterlife, once you're a ghost and in purgatory or what have you, that the interactions between that world and the human world or the living world is fuzzy in such a way that you can't. So even though this force is a good force or force for good, and trying to kind of communicate to the living people something, that it just comes off as so strange and bizarre that you can't. The lines of communication, there's something's lost in translation, and so you're constantly dealing with that. And anyway, dealing with that in the beginning, and then it pivots at the end, and you realize that when they remove the remains of this person out of the house, and they think that they've protected the house, it turns out that there are two forces of evil in the house. One is all these bodies that a guy who was living there before and practicing witchcraft had literally packed into the walls, which I think is one of the freakiest things in a movie.
It was the most memorable part of that movie to me because I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember that
fall
part.
Out of the frickin' wall.
Or when the kid pukes or whatever and it kind of floats in the air.
Oh yeah, oh gosh, what do they call that? There's a name for that. Plasma, not plasma. But anyway, it's like ethereal something or other. You guys know it. It's ectoplasm. There we go. They talk about it in the Ghostbusters movies. But anyway, so you remove this one sort of ghost force, and it allows the other evil in the house to go nuts. And it all focuses around this kid who's sick. And I think the idea behind this is that because he's sick, he's closer to the dark.
Right.
The darkness is what I was going to say, but I meant the afterlife. And anyway, so that does a really good job of telling a good story.
It is a good movie. From what I remember, I haven't seen it in.
Well, the other thing is that you're dealing with the mom and dad are having a problem in this story, and so the domestic family drama is interesting as well. Mm-hmm. And you're not just kind of going, oh, what a boring family, or what a typical family.
Because it earns it.
Exactly.
It earns it throughout the movie. Like we talked about time and time again, and sure. For the rest of the podcast we do, we'll talk about it more. That these movies have to earn. I think that's a critical
factor. Anyway, so that's definitely top of my list. Others,
I want to say one thing is that you've left your window open in your bedroom, also known as our studio, and I keep seeing people walk by, shadows in the distance, and while we're talking about this, it's scaring the crap out of me.
Shall I close the window?
No, it's okay. I just wanted to make a note that I'm over here getting freaked out by these shadows.
Yeah, I'm positioned in such a way that I'm looking away from the window. I didn't...
Every time I look at you, there's like a shadow walking in the background.
Yeah, I almost never leave that window open.
But yeah, anyway, let's talk about a little bit more. We talked a little earlier. It Follows. We watched it for the first time.
Yeah, I think there's not a lot more to be said about that movie. It does a really good job.
It's the creepiest idea ever, though, right?
Oh,
I mean, the fact that if you have sex, you'll have this creepy
so this is
following you.
This is what I think that it was a good way of relating to teenagers. Because this is very aimed at teenagers. This movie is one of the things that you get introduced to as a teenager is sex. And we're always worried about STDs, or at least you're supposed to be worried about STDs. And they turn that fear into an actual critter. And so I say critter, but evil spirit or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it takes on the image of someone that you know, or it could be anything. And I like that too, because the disease you get could be anything.
Yeah.
And it literally will follow you the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Some of these things anyway. They come up and they slowly creep up on you, and then they get you. and if it touches you, you die. So I wonder if I'm sure there's some relation or subtle references to AIDS or anything else like that.
I wonder. You bring up
a lot of parallels to STDs.
It made me think because we were talking about it before we started watching it. The fact that you say that you think it's aimed at teenagers. I wonder if
I don't know that I don't mean that it's aimed at teenagers and like it's a message.
No.
I just stories aimed at teenagers.
Yeah. But I'm saying
17, 18, that
yeah, I wonder if that was the reason when we looked it up because the Rotten Tomatoes score is what did we say, like 96% on this, and the audience score is much lower. So I wonder if the fact that it was aimed at a younger demographic that they didn't really. Because it's a bit of a slower build kind of movie. It's got some really tense moments.
It wasn't a paranormal activity.
It wasn't a jump scare every 5 second kind of movie. I wonder if that's why the audience score was lower because you get these people that go see every horror movie that are these young teenagers and this.
But do you think that audience is also likely to go rate a movie on Rotten Tomatoes? If you're 17, are you going to go to Rotten Tomatoes and write a review?
That's true. I don't know.
So I think that.
I'm not sure how those audience scores are gathered. Also, I don't know if they.
Yeah, if it's actual people who use that site or if there's some sort of collection
surveys.
Service.
Yeah,
I would hope that it's based on something more scientific than people just showing up. Although they talk about the wisdom of crowds. I mean, you have lots of things in aggregate, you can get pretty accurate numbers. Yeah. I like the fact
it was significantly lower, which was throwing me off because it was like 96% to like 60%. It was significant.
It is one of those movies that it's critically acclaimed, and if you have a slightly more sophisticated palate for films, you're going to enjoy this movie.
Oh, I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was great.
Yeah, they just the camera work is nice. You kind of have this realistic reaction to things like we talked about earlier.
There's only 2 cheap jump scares that I can think of.
Which ones?
One's completely unnecessary. The one where
I think you mentioned this.
We mentioned one, but then I remember the other one after we had talked about it. The one where she's brushing her teeth or whatever, and the ball comes and bounces against the window.
Oh yeah.
That one seemed really unnecessary.
Actually, I just remember something. There's something that this seems wholly unnecessary in this movie, and I kind of wondered if it was just once. I would say that it was kind of a funny detail or an interesting detail of the movie, and let alone. But it happens twice, but it sort of leaves it hanging. She has these 2 neighbor boys that are kind of pervy, or at least one neighbor boy, maybe his friend or whatever. So she's in the swimming pool, and they're peeking through at her.
Well, see, that's the scene is when the ball hits and it zooms back to the outside, and there's this
it's the same
one of these
kid.
boys that's like right outside her window, like on the roof. Who threw the ball?
Yeah,
who threw the ball? The ball hits the window. The kid's up there.
Yeah, so why? Surely he didn't want to be caught.
Yeah,
and so he wouldn't do it himself. I don't know. That was a weird detail, and I'm not really. I wonder if maybe that was a storyline that they had to just kind of lose on the cutting room floor. I don't know.
I don't know, but that was a cheap.
It's very strange.
And then one that we saw coming the whole time was there's this hole in this door. And we're waiting. The
camera zooms in.
Yeah, and the ghost is gonna pop up, and you're waiting. The music's building, and you're like,
boom, there.
And here we go, and then there it is. Still made me jump because those things scare me. But
one of the things I like best about the setup for this movie is usually when there's something that the main character can see and nobody else can see, it remains that way until either the very end or nobody else ever sees it. What they did nicely here so that her friends believe her is that nobody really knows, and then all of a sudden her hair lifts up behind her.
Oh, so great.
And then one of the guys gets kicked or hit with a chair or something.
He tries to go like hit the
and it just
with the chair and
knocks him way back.
Oh yeah.
And it's surprisingly looked amazing. It's like the kind of thing in a when the Hulk hits somebody and you just see him flying. It was that kind of motion.
So unexpected.
It was unexpected in a movie like where you're not looking for lots of CG, and he just fucking gets knocked.
It's this ghost that walks all the time, so you wouldn't expect it to have that kind of strength. And all of a sudden, he goes flying across the beach.
That was a fun moment in the movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun moments.
We could go on and on.
Yeah,
definitely worth your time.
Another one I mentioned briefly earlier is the Insidious series. I think those movies, for the most part, are really good. I think the first one is really good for about the first 3/4. Then it gets kind of. I think it's the best overall movie as a whole. Like if we're talking about as a movie cinematically, it's the best one. I personally like the second one the best. A lot of people have problems with the second one, but I'm not sure why. Because I think it's the scariest out of all of them. And it does a lot of cool things with the story that I won't spoil for anybody now. But it does a lot of cool things that I really like the second one a lot. The third one could have been the best out of the series and one of the best modern horror movies ever if the second half of the movie was as good as the first half. I mentioned this in my review when I reviewed this movie on my site, and the first half has some really, really good kind of creepy moments to like the whole idea behind it is this girl is injured and is in this full body cast or in a wheelchair, and so she's pretty much motionless, which is a fantastic idea for a horror movie. She can't move, and as an audience for this part of the movie you feel like you can't move, you feel like you're her. It's really well done, and then it falls apart at the end, and it's all a bunch of cheap jump scares, and you see all the things that are haunting. They're not scary anymore. Basically, every problem that we've talked about so far is in the second half of this movie, and it ruins it. And it's this could have been so good. I really liked where this is headed. So the third one's not great, but the first two Insidious movies I think are really, really good. Definitely towards the top of my list in terms of these kind of movies. You got anything else?
Yeah, there's.
I know you want to talk about Cabin in the Woods. Go ahead.
Well, I'll leave it briefly. Cabin in the Woods breaks the tradition of it's more in the avenue of Scream, where you have a film that appears on the surface to be one thing and it turns out to be another. I like that movie enough that I don't want to spoil it for you, even though it's a few years old now. It mixes the comedy and the knowing what it is concepts really well. Definitely go look into that. There's a handful of things I want to mention that before we wrap up that are scary and just kind of fun on the surface. So one is a series of shows I watched as a kid called Unsolved Mysteries. They're creepy. Not all of them are about things like demons or whatever. Some of them are. Some of them are just unsolved murders and things like that. Really great show. They're hard to find today. They used to be all on YouTube, and then they got taken down for copyright. You can buy the discs, but they're expensive. Good luck finding them if you can. I wouldn't feel bad about torrenting them, but I don't want to get in trouble, so I didn't tell you that. Another great movie that I think is worth your time is a Japanese film called Dark Water. Don't watch the American version; it's terrible. The Japanese version, if you don't mind subtitles, is really, really good.
Speaking of American remakes of Japanese films, The Ring is a pretty good one. It
is. That one did good. I haven't seen the Japanese version, but the American version of that movie did creep. Actually, that's a really worth. Too bad we didn't talk about that one. I couldn't talk about that one, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know enough about it, but there was some really messed up stuff in that movie.
It's a little long. It does draw itself out a bit, but it does have some really good moments. It's a pretty scary movie overall. So that's a good. That was in like 2003 or 2004.
Gosh, first time I watched that movie, I was sitting next to we got this big open window here. I was sitting next to a huge window watching that in the dark. Anyway, it's creepy. Another good movie. We didn't talk about this because Jordan didn't see it yet, and so it's not really something we could go back and forth on. But a movie called Trick or Treat.
We were going to watch it, but we just haven't gotten around to it.
It didn't happen, but it is, in my opinion, possibly the best ever. It's not. It falls in this kind of weird spot. It's almost more of a. It's a legend kind of type movie. I don't know. It's hard to place.
The distinction that I heard when I was listening to one of my movie podcasts that I listened to, and they were talking about this movie a little bit, is it's less of a horror movie as we see horror movies in general.
I would not line this up with The Conjuring.
It's more of a Halloween movie.
Yeah, well, so that's an interesting distinction because I think Halloween movies are more fun.
Right.
Usually. So like a good Halloween movie, like Hocus Pocus.
Yeah, stuff like that. I've seen it. It's not my thing. But
Hocus Pocus is an outright scary movie unless maybe you're 5. But it tells the tale and it surrounds Halloween. Anyway, so Trick or Treat is sort of about the celebrating the night of Halloween, and it tells 3 or 4 different stories that all happen on the same night, that all have something to do with each other. Oh, it's fantastic. And this goes back to my point earlier that I don't think scary movies have enough content usually to last 90 minutes. So they tell all these different overlapping stories, and it all centers around this little Halloween sprite that is just sort of the spirit of Halloween. Mm-hmm. And this legend which isn't in reality, so they kind of have to, it doesn't exist for most of us, I don't think, that you're not supposed to blow out candles and pumpkins. And that's kind of the thing that usually triggers the sprite. It's sort of we've disrespected him, and so there's one character in that story that respects Halloween night,
Gotcha.
and she gets off.
Gotcha.
She walks right past the sprite, and she's fine. And
Yeah,
I like that. That's a movie that follows its own rules.
Right. I was interested to see it. We unfortunately we've watched a ton of movies.
We can watch it this week and then just
Yeah.
briefly talk about it next time. But we could maybe do a movie review for that.
Maybe, yeah. A couple others I just want to throw out there.
And I've got
go ahead,
two more.
Finish up.
A movie from my childhood that I really love is Ernest Scared Stupid.
Okay.
Maybe it's not for adults. Watch it with your kids. And then finally, The Mothman Prophecies. If not for Trick or Treat, that would easily be my favorite scary movie.
It's a really good one. Like I said, for some reason I just don't connect the horror and that together, but
call it suspense, but it definitely has some freaky
it's
moments.
a really good
and
movie.
it does a good job of
It's one of my dad's
not
favorite movies.
showing
Yeah.
the bad guy. You want to talk about suspense and working around. And this, in fact, is based in reality. I've been to the town. I've read all the plaques that they have on the places where the sightings happened, and it's in the area of Bigfoot, except it's much more legend than sort of, I don't know, legend, myth, whatever you want to say. It's creepy. It's fun.
A few more I would throw there. I talked about the first Sinister movie a little bit earlier. I mean, that is what it is. We talked about that enough. The Babadook, which is an Australian movie, came out last year, the year before.
What is it? Is that a demon or like a
it's a
mythical creature?
So it's this children's book that's terrifying, but basically, it's been I rewatched it recently, but I can't seem to remember the exact premise off the top of my head. But it's like if you read this book, then it summons this force and it follows you around. I didn't like it very much the first time I saw it, and the reason behind that was it was different than I was expecting. I was expecting one of these straight up horror, Insidious or The Conjuring kind of movies. It's much more psychological kind of movie, and everybody wonders whether they're going crazy and stuff like that. So once I thought about that a little bit more, I was like, okay, and then I rewatched it and was like, okay, this is a really good movie. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely worth a watch to anybody that hasn't seen it. I think it came out last year, the year before. It's another one of those lower budget kind of ones, $3 or $4 million probably. But yeah, really good movie. Has some great scares in it as well. Your next, we talked about Devil. I don't know if that's considered a horror movie. In the elevator.
Shyamalan.
Yeah, he wrote it but didn't direct it, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, when everybody's tracked it, that was really good. I like that a lot.
I forgot about that.
Have you seen the movie called Orphan?
No, I know about it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
that was a movie that I kicked a lot of kids out of when I worked in the movie.
It's a pretty good movie. It's got a great twist at the end. So yeah, I'm not gonna spoil the twist for anybody, but I'd recommend that one. If you want a scary movie, it's got a great twist to it. 28 Days and Weeks we talked about a little bit when we were talking about zombie movies, but those are more recent, so I figured I'd bring those back up for modern horror movies. Watched one the other night called The Crazies, which is pretty good. It's kind of that zombie concept, but it's more of a biological attack kind of movie, and these people still have some of their brain power. They can understand and they do things. They just basically just go crazy, but they're not completely zombies.
A little bit like I Am Legend there.
But they have more of their brain function than that.
Okay.
So that one's
more of a disease.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a quick movie. It's entertaining. It's a little bit more action based than horror based, but pretty good movie. But yeah, I mean that's all that I've got for this one.
All right, it's a good list.
Yeah, fun episode. Definitely, I like doing this countdown Halloween thing that we've done. We did some.
Yeah, we could do what's another good big holiday that has good movies. There's no good like Christmas movies or times. So.
I'm sure we'll figure something out though, because I know next week we're going to talk about James Bond movies. In honor of Spectre coming out.
There's the Heart of the Sea is coming up, which is based off the story that inspired Moby Dick. I can't wait for that.
We can talk about like movies based at sea or something for that.
Do you want to have a lead up to Star Wars?
Somehow? Oh yeah, we're definitely going to have a.
Okay.
We'll have
to do like a prequel conversation followed by.
We'll have to plan it out. Right. That's a little far.
Look forward to that.
But I know next week we are doing James Bond for Spectre. We'll also probably do a review reaction kind of video to that after we see it. But I know the podcast next week will be based on James Bond, all the James Bond, I'm sure. If you want to see any of these Countdown Halloween movies, we got episodes 1 through 3, classic slasher zombies. They're all on the YouTube page. So subscribe to that at Jordan's Movie Guide YouTube page. Subscribe and like and comment and all that stuff. We definitely want to hear from you guys. Anybody that's listening, like to talk to you guys.
Yeah,
about
comments are
these
good.
movies.
Lets us know that our views aren't happening by a computer.
Yeah. We just like to talk about these things, so we'd like to talk about them with you guys too. I know that I'm pretty much all horror movied out after this, though. I mean, we've watched a lot of these movies the last month or so. I've probably watched 10 to 15 horror movies since we started doing this.
I've watched at least 2 a week.
Yeah, it's been
So, a little burned out.
it's been a
It'd
lot.
be nice to pivot to
Need a break
James
from
Bond.
being scared. So let's do some campy James Bond movies instead next week. Just a couple quick plugs. Check out my website, georgemovieguide.com. Lots of good stuff on there. Movie reviews, top 10 lists, all sorts of stuff. If you really like our podcast or really like my site and you want to donate some money to us, we got patreon.com/JMG. You can follow me on Twitter at Jordan's Guide.
I'm at Greg Crafted, GRGCRAFTED.
That's all we got for this episode, guys. Thanks for listening. I'm Jordan,
I'm Greg.
and we'll talk to you next week.